Today we will be discussing the era of good feelings, the age of Jackson, and manifest destiny following the War of 1812. Today we will look at how the U.S. changed between the years of 1814 and 1850. The period of time following the War of 1812 was known as the Era of Good Feelings. It was a time period in which the United States looked to establish a national identity, meaning they wanted to show the world who they were and what they were about. President Monroe wanted to promote national unity and did so by calling this two terms the Era of Good Feelings. During this time, a number of improvements to roads, factories, and technology happened. Things such as the cotton gin, interchangeable parts, and other machinery were created during this time, and this was known as the Industrial Revolution. This was also a period of time where the Supreme Court's power of judicial review became more solidified with various different cases that tested constitutionality of certain laws. While the United States was advancing industrially at home, there were other issues happening around the globe. In 1821, Mexico had gained its independence from Spain, and soon after, the rest of Latin American nations fought for their independence as well. Many European nations indicated that they would help Spain to regain their lost colonies, which made Monroe and the British very nervous. Because of this, they vowed to protect these nations from being taken over again. Basically, the reason why they are doing this and why we are doing this is to protect our trade interests and also keep Spain from becoming more powerful than us. Monroe released his Monroe Doctrine or statement to Congress in 1823. In this statement, it states that the United States would not allow European nations to create any more colonies on our side of the globe, known as the Western Hemisphere, or interfere with any free nations. Any attempt to do so would be considered dangerous to American peace and safety. We were not strong enough to really do anything about it, but it helped boost the nation's influence in the world. President Monroe decided to follow George Washington's example and not seek a third term presidency. So, in the election of 1824, former Secretary of State John Quincy Adams will run against Andrew Jackson. Jackson portrayed himself as a simple, regular man, even though he was actually rich. This helped him get a good amount of votes. Jackson actually won the electoral vote, but he did not have the majority and therefore was not elected president. When this happens, the House of Representatives will break what we call a tie. Before that election began, the Speaker of the House, Henry Clay, persuaded the House of Representatives to vote for John Quincy Adams. This upset Jackson greatly and said that the two of them had entered into a corrupt bargain. This led to Jackson forming the Democratic Party. After 4 years, the election of 1828 saw the same exact candidates, John Quincy Adams versus Andrew Jackson. But during this election, more people were able to vote because voting privilege were extended to all white men. Before this, in order to vote, you had to be a white man and own land. That is no longer the case with the election of 1828. Jackson will end up winning this election because of that, and he will use what we call the spoil system to give jobs to his friends. The nation saw many changes during Andrew Jackson's presidency. Firstly, Jackson destroyed the national bank created by Hamilton's economic plan by refusing to renew its charter or contract because he did not trust it. He felt that the bank only helped out the rich. He also saw the nullification crisis. Now, previously we spoke about the Alien and Sedition Acts and Kentucky and Virginia nullifying or canceling out those government actions. This will come into play again when South Carolina, led by John C. Calhoun, threatened to leave the United States because they did not want to pay off the Tariff of 1828. They called it the Tariff of Abominations. A tariff makes foreign goods more expensive. Probably the most controversial thing to happen during Andrew Jackson's presidency was the passing of the Indian Removal Act in 1830. This act forcibly removed Native American tribes and relocated them to present-day Oklahoma. It was during this time that the Cherokee departed on the Trail of Tears. Roughly 4,000 Native Americans will die on the Trail of Tears on their journey to Oklahoma. The Indian Removal Act was passed during a time period known as Manifest Destiny. As the United States pushed the natives further west, they also started settling into the Louisiana Territory that we purchased from France in 1803. Americans believed it was their destiny or God-given right to settle all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That is the definition of manifest destiny. As this occurred, the northern cities became more industrialized, and the differences between the North and South continued to grow, creating an issue of sectionalism. The South still continued to rely on slave labor, while the North was using machinery and paid labor. During Manifest Destiny's time period, there were many reasons for moving west. First, some people wanted to convert the natives to Christianity. They wanted to make them more civilized, like Americans were at the time. Also, many people decided they wanted to find more economic opportunity, whether it be set up a farm or the California Gold Rush. Or they were moving westward for religious freedom, like the Mormons did when they moved to Utah. One of the most popular destinations for Americans during the period of time of Manifest Destiny was Texas. Americans began moving into Texas, which was then Mexico. To live there, they had to give up certain rights they had as American citizens, like freedom of religion, they had to be Catholic, they were not allowed to have guns, and they were not allowed to bring their slaves into Texas. Most Americans refused to listen or comply, and they began a rebellion against the Mexican government to keep those rights. These Americans in Texas put up a famous stand at an abandoned mission called the Alamo, and there almost every single American died. They continued to fight and eventually won their independence in 1846. Texas will later apply for statehood and be admitted into the Union, but Mexico will become very angry when this happens and began disputing the border of Texas and Mexico. Our president at the time, President James Polk, provoked Mexico into fighting by sending American troops to the Rio Grande River. Mexicans believed it was actually a river much further north. Americans in California also started a rebellion during this time. The Mexican-American War eventually ends in 1848 as an American victory. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gave the United States California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. The U.S. paid Mexico $18 million for this land, and it effectively ended the Mexican-American War in an American victory. If you look at the map on the right side of the screen, you will see the territory that Texas was in red, as well as the territory in orange that we will get with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The era of good feelings, Age of Jackson, and Manifest Destiny changed the United States in many ways. The United States continued to expand until all the territory we currently have was acquired outside of Hawaii and Alaska. Bitterness between the North and South continued to grow due to taxes and new reform movements such as abolition or the freeing of slaves. It also helped start the women's rights movement for them fighting for equality since voting rights during this time had been extended even further.